The moment my son asked if he and his family could stay with me for a few weeks, I said yes without hesitation. That is what mothers do. You do not turn your back on your own blood, especially when they are standing on your porch in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon with suitcases and two scared-looking kids clinging to their father's legs. My name is Ruth. I am 64 years old, and I have lived in this house in Colton, South Carolina, for 31 years. My husband built the back porch with his own hands the summer before he got sick. He planted the magnolia tree in the front yard when our first son was born. Every room in this house carries the fingerprint of a man who loved his family more than anything in this world. And when he passed 7 years ago, I promised myself I would take care of it the way he would have wanted. So when my younger son showed up that Tuesday, telling me his landlord had sold the building and all the tenants had 60 days to vacate, I opened the door wide and told him to bring everything inside. His wife stood behind him on the walkway, scanning the front of the house with a look I did not recognize at the time, but would come to know very well. It was the look of someone doing math in their head, measuring rooms, counting closets, calculating how much space she could claim. Her name was Kristen. She had been married to my son for 9 years. We had always gotten along fine at holidays and birthday dinners, the kind of polite relationship where you exchange pleasantries and compliments and never really say what you think. I knew she was opinionated. I knew she liked things a certain way, but I figured that was just her personality. And besides, they would only be here for a few weeks, maybe a month at the outside. The first week was almost pleasant. My son worked long hours at the distribution warehouse on the east side of town, and Kristen stayed home with the children while she looked for a new job after getting laid off from the insurance agency. The kids, Nolan, who was 10, and Harper, who was 7, were sweet and polite. They called me Grandma Ruth and asked permission before touching anything. Kristen kept the upstairs bedrooms tidy and even cooked dinner twice. I thought to myself, this might actually work. By the third week, things started to shift in small ways that seemed harmless at the time. Kristen rearranged the spice rack in the kitchen because she said my system did not make sense. She moved the hall mirror to a different wall because the light was better there. She replaced my cotton dish towels with a set of microfiber ones she ordered online because mine were old and did not absorb properly. Each change was tiny. Each one had a reasonable explanation. And each one moved me a little further from feeling at home in my own house. By the second month, the weeks had become a month and a half with no mention of leaving. I brought it up gently one evening, while Kristen and I were clearing the dinner table. "Any luck finding a new place?" I asked, stacking plates by the sink. She barely looked up. "The market is insane right now," she said. "Everything in our price range is either falling apart or in a terrible school district. We cannot just move the kids anywhere." I understood that. I did. But something in her tone suggested that looking for a new place was not exactly at the top of her priority list. She had started referring to the refrigerator as ours, the pantry as ours, the washing machine as ours. These small, possessive words crept into her vocabulary like weeds in a garden, and I noticed every single one. In March, Kristen got a job as a front desk coordinator at a medical practice. Good pay, decent hours. Between her salary and my son's, they were earning more than enough to afford an apartment. I waited for the conversation about moving out. It never came. Instead, Kristen announced that she wanted to repaint the guest bathroom. "The color is depressing," she told my son, while I sat right there in the living room. "Nobody wants to look at beige walls." My husband and I had chosen that color together when we remodeled the bathroom 15 years ago. It was not depressing. It was warm and neutral, and it was ours. But before I could say anything, my son nodded and said, "Sure, whatever you think, babe." The bathroom became sage green by the following weekend. Kristen did not ask my opinion. Through the spring, her confidence grew bolder. She started hosting her coworkers for Friday evening drinks in my living room. The first time, she mentioned it casually that morning. "Oh, by the way, a few girls from work are stopping by tonight. Hope that is okay." She did not wait for my answer. By the fourth Friday, she stopped mentioning it altogether. I would come downstairs at 6 o'clock to find 4 or 5 women in my living room. Shoes kicked off, wine glasses on my coffee table without coasters, music playing from a speaker someone had balanced on my bookshelf. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to make myself a sandwich and found Kristen's friend Dana standing at my stove, heating up some appetizer in my good skillet. "Oh, hi," she said cheerfully. "You must be the mother-in-law," Kristen said to make ourselves at home. Make yourselves at home. In my home. I took my sandwich to my bedroom and ate it sitting on the edge of my bed, listening to laughter coming through the walls. I was 64 years old, eating alone in my room while strangers partied in my living room. By summer, Kristen had stopped pretending to consult me about anything. She signed the kids up for a swim team that practiced 40 minutes away, which meant my son had to leave work early 3 times a week to drive them. She converted half of my garden shed into storage for the children's bicycles and sports equipment without asking. My gardening tools ended up in a pile behind the shed. Some of them rusted from rain because there was no cover. When I mentioned that the shed was mine and I needed it for my tools, she gave me a look like I was being unreasonable. "The kids need somewhere to put their stuff," she said. "You can buy a small plastic bin for your garden things. They sell them at the hardware store for like $20. A plastic bin." For tools I had been collecting and organizing for decades, tools my husband had given me. But I did not argue. I bought the bin. One Saturday morning in July, my friend Dorothy called and asked if she could come over for lunch. Dorothy and I had been friends for 42 years. We taught at the same elementary school before we both retired. We used to have lunch together at my house every other week. But since my son's family moved in, I had been making excuses and meeting her at the diner instead. This time I decided enough was enough. It was my house. I could have a friend over for lunch. I told Dorothy to come at noon, and I would make chicken salad. When Kristen heard me on the phone, she walked into the kitchen with her arms crossed. "Who is coming over?" she asked. "My friend Dorothy. We are having lunch." "Today?" She frowned. "I was going to clean the living room today. The kids have been tracking dirt everywhere. We will sit in the kitchen. We will not be in your way." Kristen sighed loudly. The kind of sigh that is meant to communicate maximum displeasure, without actually saying anything you can argue with. "Fine," she said. "But can you keep it short? I need the kitchen by 2. She needed my kitchen by 2. I stared at her for a moment, and she stared right back with that flat, unblinking expression she had perfected over the past several months. The expression that said, "I am being patient with you, and you should be grateful." Dorothy came at noon. We sat at the kitchen table with our chicken salad and iced tea, and for about 20 minutes it felt normal. Then Kristen came through with the vacuum cleaner, running it right up to the kitchen doorway, drowning out our conversation. She vacuumed the same stretch of hallway 3 times. When she finally stopped, Dorothy leaned over and said quietly, "Honey, what on earth is going on in this house?" I did not know what to say, so I said nothing. After Dorothy left, earlier than planned because the atmosphere had become suffocating, I went to find my son. He was in the garage changing the oil in his truck. I told him what had happened. I told him that I felt like a guest in my own home. I told him that Kristen's behavior had become unbearable. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked at me with tired eyes. "Mom, you know how she is. She is just particular. She does not mean anything by it." She vacuumed the hallway 3 times to drown out my conversation with Dorothy. Maybe she was just cleaning. The house gets dirty with the kids running around. She told me I needed to keep my lunch short because she needed the kitchen by 2. My son sighed. He had the same defeated posture he always had when the subject of his wife came up. "I will talk to her," he said. But I knew he would not. Or if he did, it would change nothing. A week later, something happened that changed everything. I came home from a doctor's appointment earlier than expected and heard Kristen talking on the phone upstairs. Her voice carried down the stairwell, and what I heard made my blood turn cold. She was talking to her sister. "I know," she was saying. "It is a great location. 3 bedrooms, plus that big room downstairs. If she would just move into one of those senior communities, we could have the whole place. Honestly, I have been looking at some brochures. There is one over in Greenville that is really nice. Independent living, they call it. She could have her own little apartment there, and we would visit on weekends. Pause. No, my husband does not know yet. I am waiting for the right time to bring it up. But honestly, she is 64. She is not going to live here forever. We need to start thinking about the future. I stood at the bottom of the stairs with my purse still on my shoulder, and my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth. This woman was planning to ship me off to a facility so she could have my house, the house my husband built, the house I had lived in for 31 years. She was browsing brochures. That night, I did not sleep. I lay in the dark and listened to the house settle and creak the way old houses do. And I made a decision. I was not going to cry about this. I was not going to beg my son to intervene. I was not going to waste another month hoping things would improve. I was going to act. The next morning, after everyone left, I called a real estate agent named Connie Palmer. I'd seen her signs around the neighborhood for years. Professional, well-reviewed, and most importantly, discreet. I told her I wanted to know what my house was worth. She came that same afternoon. Connie walked through every room, took measurements, checked the foundation, inspected the roof from the yard. When she was done, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "Mrs. Hadley, this house is in excellent condition. The neighborhood has appreciated significantly in the last decade. I would list it at $220,000, and I would expect offers within 2 weeks, $220,000. My husband and I paid $45,000 for it in 1995. That same week, I found an apartment. It was a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a quiet building near downtown, 8 blocks from the library and walking distance to everything I needed. Hardwood floors, big windows, a little balcony where I could put flower pots. The rent was reasonable, but I was not going to rent. The unit was for sale at $85,000, and with the proceeds from my house, I could buy it outright and have more than enough left to live comfortably for years. I hired Connie. We listed the house quietly, off-market, targeting buyers from her private client list. Within 10 days, we had 3 offers. I accepted the highest one, $231,000, from a young couple relocating from Charlotte. They wanted to close fast. I said fine. During those 10 days, I moved through the house like a ghost, quietly sorting my belongings into what I would take and what I would leave behind. Nobody noticed. Kristen was too busy redecorating. My son was too busy working. The children were in their own world. I packed my late husband's photographs, my important documents, the quilt my mother made, and the small wooden box where I kept his wedding ring. Everything else was just furniture. On a Thursday evening in late August, I called my older son, Thomas, who lived in Nashville. "Thomas, I need to tell you something," I said. "I am selling the house." There was a long silence. Then he said, "Mom, tell me everything." I told him. All of it. The rearranged furniture, the stolen garden shed, the Friday night invasions, the vacuuming during Dorothy's visit, the phone call about the senior facility. When I finished, Thomas said something I will never forget. He said, "Mom, I am proud of you, and I am sorry I was not there to see it sooner." The closing was scheduled for September 15th. On September 12th, a Wednesday evening, I decided it was time. Everyone was at the dinner table. My son was eating meatloaf. Kristen was scrolling through her phone between bites. The children were arguing about something that happened at school, a normal evening in a house that no longer felt like mine. I set my fork down and said, "I have something to tell all of you." Something in my voice must have been different because even the children stopped talking. Kristen looked up from her phone. "I have sold the house," I said. "The closing is Friday. The new owners take possession in 2 weeks." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. My son spoke first. His face had gone pale. "Mom, what did you say?" "I sold the house. I have already purchased an apartment downtown. I am moving next week." Kristen's phone clattered onto the table. She stared at me with her mouth slightly open, and for the first time in over a year, she had absolutely nothing to say. Then it hit her, and she exploded. "You cannot do that," she shouted. "We live here." Our children live here. You cannot just sell a house out from under your own family. It is my house, I replied calmly. My name is on the deed. My husband and I bought it together, and when he died, it passed to me. I have every legal right to sell it. But where are we supposed to go? Her voice cracked, and I saw real panic in her eyes. We do not have savings for a deposit. We were not prepared for this. You have been living here rent-free for over a year, I said. Both of you work. You had plenty of time and money to prepare. You chose not to because you assumed this was permanent. My son pushed his plate away. Mom, why did you not tell us? We could have worked something out. I tried, I said. I asked you multiple times when you were planning to move out. The answer was always soon, and soon never came. Kristen stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. This is insane. You are a selfish, spiteful old woman. You are punishing us because you cannot handle sharing your precious house. I looked at her steadily. Kristen, I heard your phone call with your sister last month. The one about the senior living facility in Greenville? The one where you talked about waiting for the right time to push me out of my own home. The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, then closed it. My son turned to her slowly. What phone call? He asked. She tried to recover. It was not like that. I was just exploring options. For her benefit, for my benefit, I repeated. You were looking at brochures to put me in a facility so you could have the whole house. Tell me, Kristen, which part of that was for my benefit? My son stared at his wife. Is that true? She did not answer, which was answer enough. Nolan looked confused. Harper looked frightened. I hated that the children were witnessing this, but there was no clean way to do what needed to be done. Grandma, Harper said in a small voice. Are you leaving us? I knelt down so I was at her eye level. Sweetie, I am not leaving you. I am moving to a new apartment, and you can visit me anytime you want. I will always be your grandmother. That does not change. Harper nodded, though she did not look convinced. Nolan stared at his plate and said nothing. The next 2 days were chaos. Kristen alternated between rage and desperate bargaining. She threatened legal action. She called a lawyer, who apparently told her she had no case, because she slammed the phone down and did not mention lawyers again. She tried guilt. She tried tears. She tried sending the children to plead with me. At one point, she cornered me in the hallway and hissed, "You will regret this. When you are sitting alone in your little apartment with nobody to talk to, you will realize what you threw away." I already know what I threw away, I said. I threw away 2 years of being treated like a nuisance in my own home. I can live with that. On Friday, I went to the closing and signed the papers. The young couple from Charlotte, Kevin and Maria, were thrilled. They had a toddler and another baby on the way, and they kept talking about the magnolia tree in the front yard and how the kids would love it. I thought about my husband planting that tree, and for a moment my eyes burned, but I signed. The following week, my son's family moved into a rental apartment across town. It was smaller than what they were used to, and Kristen was furious about the neighborhood. My son called me the night they moved in. "Mom," he said. His voice was hoarse. "I am sorry. For all of it. You do not need to apologize." I said, "Yes, I do. I saw what was happening and I did nothing. I let her treat you that way because it was easier than fighting about it. That was wrong. You were in a hard position. That is not an excuse." He paused. "Mom, I want you to know something. I told Kristen that things have to change. Not just about you. About everything. The way she talks to people. The way she takes over. I told her if she does not get help, a counselor or something, I do not know if I can stay." I was not expecting that. My son, who had spent years avoiding conflict, was finally standing up. "Whatever you decide," I said, "I support you, and I will always be here for those kids." 3 weeks later, I hosted my first dinner party in my new apartment. Dorothy came, and my friend Miriam, and Helen from church. We sat around my small dining table, eating pot roast and drinking wine and laughing for 3 straight hours. Nobody vacuumed the hallway. Nobody asked me to keep it short. Nobody looked at me like I was in the way. At one point, Dorothy raised her glass and said, "To Ruth," who reminded all of us that being kind does not mean being a doormat. I nearly cried into my pot roast. In October, Thomas drove down from Nashville for a weekend visit. He brought flowers for the apartment and a framed photograph of his father that he had restored from an old negative. I hung it in the living room, where I could see it from the sofa. "Mom, this place is perfect," Thomas said. "It feels like you again." He was right. It did. Over the following months, things settled into a new rhythm. My son came by every other Sunday with the children. At first, Kristen refused to come, which was fine with me. But as the weeks passed, the kids started opening up again. Harper would curl up next to me on the sofa and tell me about her friends at school. Nolan showed me a science project he was working on and asked if I could help him with the research. They started calling me more often. Short calls, just 5 minutes, but they meant the world. In November, my son told me that Kristen had started seeing a therapist. "She is working on it," he said. "I do not know if it will change everything, but at least she is trying." "I hope it helps," I said. And I meant it. I did not hate Kristen. I hated what she had done to my home and my dignity. But I did not want her to suffer. I wanted her to understand that other people's generosity is not an invitation to take over their lives. Just before Thanksgiving, I got a call from Maria, the young woman who had bought my house. She was breathless with excitement. "Mrs. Hadley, you will never believe this. We were cleaning out the crawl space under the back porch, and we found a metal box. It had old letters inside, and some of them are addressed to you." My heart jumped. My husband had always been a sentimental man. He kept everything: letters, notes, ticket stubs. I had searched the house before moving, but clearly missed this hiding spot. "Would you like to come get them?" Maria asked. I drove over that afternoon. Maria met me at the door with her toddler on her hip and the metal box in her free hand. The house looked different already. Bright curtains in the windows, a tricycle on the porch, a welcome mat that said the Sullivans. But the magnolia tree was the same, tall and green and steady, exactly the way my husband had planted it. Inside the box were 17 letters my husband had written to me over the years. Birthday letters, anniversary notes. One he wrote the day our first son was born. I had never seen most of them. He must have been saving them, tucking them away one by one in that metal box under the porch he built with his own hands. I sat in my car in the driveway and read every single one. The last letter was dated 2 months before he died. It said, "Ruth, if you are reading this, then I have already gone somewhere I cannot write from. I want you to know that this house was never just wood and nails to me. It was you. Wherever you are, that is home. Do not let anyone make you forget that." I drove back to my apartment with the box on the passenger seat and those words ringing in my ears. Wherever you are, that is home. He was right. Home was not an address. It was not a magnolia tree or a beige bathroom or a garden shed full of tools. Home was the place where I could be myself without apology, where my voice mattered, where I was not a guest in my own life. That Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner at my apartment. Thomas came from Nashville. My son brought the children, and to my surprise, Kristen came too. She was quiet and polite. She complimented the turkey. She helped with the dishes. At one point, when we were alone in the kitchen, she said, "I owe you an apology, Ruth, for everything. I did not treat you the way you deserved." I looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." It was not a grand reconciliation. There were no tears or dramatic embraces, just 2 women standing in a small kitchen, acknowledging what had happened and choosing to move forward. Whether we would ever be close, I did not know, but we could at least be decent to each other, and sometimes that is enough. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and looked out at the city lights. The air was cool, and the sky was clear, and I could hear music playing somewhere in the distance. I thought about my husband, about his letters, about the life we had built, and the life I was building now. I was 64 years old, living alone in an apartment I owned outright, with money in the bank, friends who cared about me, sons who loved me, and grandchildren who were finding their way back. I had lost a house but gained something far more valuable. I had gained myself back, and sitting there on that balcony, with the November wind brushing my face and my husband's words still warm in my chest, I knew I had made the right choice. Not the easy one, the right one.